And you asked about Cambridge before. I think that was a very challenging period. I remember my personal tutor, he was like, Nina, you do know this is our old boys' money. It shouldn't go to you. You don't deserve this.
I know you through social circles, but really from seeing you online as well, and just in your jiu-jitsu community, it really does feel like a proper fraternity, like a really close-knit community, and everybody seems really, like, it sounds obvious to say that, but friendly with each other, but you're competing at the same time. But it does seem like you're there to help each other. I mean, is that how it is from the outside looking in?
Everyone within jiu-jitsu talks about the jiu-jitsu culture and the BJJ lifestyle, and it is something probably you have to do jiu-jitsu to kind of get it. So because it is very much like a community, and I can understand that because contrasting it to other martial arts I've done previously, where it's not, you don't kind of socialize with your peers. You just go in, it's very serious. You train and then you leave. Whereas jiu-jitsu is a bit different. But the point you mentioned about kind of you're competing with each other and supporting each other, I think that could be something we've developed as women in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
I think traditionally jiu-jitsu academies have been very competitive with each other, and there's like very strict kind of customs in terms of where you can train, who you can train with, train within your own school. But I think very early on, when I started jiu-jitsu, there weren't many women training. There might have been, you know, me and my club, a couple of other people and other clubs around the country. So, and we all wanted to compete internationally, so we didn't have much of an option. We had to train together.
Right.
So I think that culture has kind of been built up over time for us. And I think that's also a very important aspect that I've tried to instill in terms of my women's team. We're competing in terms of, even when we train together, you train hard, but the idea is we're a team and we support each other. And you know, you need to be friendly and kind and supportive, etc.
Everyone's done some sports and so on and so forth. So I'm up to boxing for a little bit.
Do you?
A little while, maybe probably thinking 2013 to about 17 or something like that.
That's a good portion of time.
A little, but it was like a peak and then it was like I'm out. But
you peaked early.
Yeah, genuinely. And the reason being was very much because as soon as people could see that I actually knew how to like put my hands up and had some sort of guard or some sort of skill set, went to another gym and these guys literally just wanted to take my head off. And that just put me on. It just put me off completely because I was like, I'm just trying to learn the techniques. I don't even know how to even avoid a shot yet. And it just put me off completely. And the worst thing was seeing like the trainer of the gym just like, yeah, fine. This is fine. Do you know what I mean? And that's and I remember fun enough speaking to our colleague about it. Literally, he said the same thing. Yeah, it happens in the same area as well. Have you experienced stuff like that? Or
I think that experience is going to be more pronounced for men, unfortunately. And it's such a shame because I have speak to a lot. Whenever I speak to people, meet people, and I say, "Oh, have you tried jiu-jitsu?" They're like, "Oh, well, let me tell you, I tried, and this happened. I beat up one of their white belts, and then they sent a black belt for me and really hurt my arm, which is ridiculous. Like it doesn't make sense from any perspective, not from a business perspective, not from a martial arts perspective. That's not the culture at our gym, thankfully. I think we've developed, and again, I think so when I started, it was a bit like that.
Right.
And I think that's why there was such a low retention level for women.
Right. Yeah.
Because, you know, say there might be one person in the gym, maybe one girl or one woman, and then another one comes in, and you're taught to be competitive. You're taught to be, you know, somebody's coming into your gym. You need to prove yourself. You need to prove our style, our school, our name. And then you end up going too rough when somebody's just come for the first time.
End up pushing someone away.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because, you know, you need to think about the long term. So in the beginning, I think when we were kind of building our women's team, had made the point of being friendly, being over friendly, being nice, you know, it's all about good vibes. I think that's what attracts people to jiu-jitsu. And then all of a sudden, within a few years, we have got loads and loads of women. Like, women are not just coming once, having a horrible experience and leaving. They're staying. And now I've got loads of training partners.
Do you feel that you are a woman in a man's sport? And is that actually tangible, or is it just like you said, you've got enough people around you now, and you're building a thing, and you've elevated to a certain level now that it doesn't even matter. You don't even see that anymore. Or do you think some people still feel that you're an exception rather than a norm? Or
I think initially, definitely in the beginning, it felt that way. I mean, firstly, there weren't many women in the gym at all. Maybe I was one, or amongst one or two.
But were you accommodated?
I think I was really lucky when we first started, and I started with Carvin, one of our mutual friends.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of was accommodating.
Right.
But it did feel like I was the only woman. And interesting, in terms of my own mentality, I defined it as that, which is something has shifted, in the sense that I was like, well, I am a woman in a man's sport. I have to prove myself. I have to work like twice as hard, 3 times as hard as everybody. I have to train really hard. I have to make sure I like train with everyone. Probably not the best way to approach things.
Yeah.
Kind of like a very competitive, headstrong frame of mind.
It's a lot of pressure as well.
Yes, I don't think it was the healthiest way to approach things. And then always feeling like you need to prove yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that's just kind of a reflection of I don't know, maybe just my background. I guess I was the same in everything. In the workplace, I have to prove myself. I come from a certain background. I have to prove myself. And interestingly, it was the same in jiu-jitsu. I was like, well, I'm a woman. I have to prove myself. I have to like make sure I train with bigger guys, which is ridiculous, because that's going to put a lot of like physical strain unnecessarily on your body. But I think it's changed. I think now there's a lot more women. In the sport, we have a really big women's team. Just generally, it's a lot more popular amongst women. So it's not something I think about anymore. But I think that's because we've managed to build a space.
One of my mantras, it's interesting what you said, is I just say it in my head, I've been fighting all my life.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you always feel like you're having to prove yourself, or it's always a battle.
Like a lot of people don't have that mentality. I've had to fight all of my life. My whole life has been a struggle. But there's reality, there is reality, but then also you make it your reality as well.
Right.
I don't know, like maybe you've come from that background, but at a certain point you decide to perpetuate that frame of mind or not, and then that defines your reality. But with jiu-jitsu, we're doing 100% every day. And so you like pump yourself up on the way to training. So you're like, literally, I'm going to go and fight, which I guess fed into my attitude or upbringing, whatever you might call it, I suppose.
Well, it's interesting, because I think I have to say this recently as well, motivation for me can come in so many different ways. You can have so many different dimensions to your character, different things that you do, and almost people often want to say, oh, you're that guy, or you're that girl, or you do this, or you do that. You can be, in my opinion, sometimes you can be a jack of all trades, master of none. Whereas for you, I feel like you've done really good in certain avenues, and it's almost like just want to explore that, the motivations for that, thinking about your academic life, and obviously studying at Oxbridge and the rest of it. That must have been a struggle in itself. Some people from an outsider looking in can look at something that someone's done. You've aced this, you've aced that. These things are just easy for you. Right? This must be a piece of cake. You're just one of those people that just good at stuff. Was it like that for you? Like, was it a struggle?
I don't think anything good comes easy in a way. And I guess I actually agree with you. I think humans can be and are multifaceted. And if you look at a lot of successful people, they kind of dip their toes in anything, because as human beings we have different interests, right?
Yeah.
And it can be so varied. And I think it's only now I feel like I can develop those aspects, even beyond just kind of academia and jiu-jitsu. Like I'm passionate about art, but I can, I can confidently be passionate and informed about art, whereas before I felt like, oh well, no, you're right, we've boxed into these kind of very strict kind of rules about what we should be. But I don't know, I really think you can be a bit of everything. And like I was saying about successful people, they go through their journey where they might launch let's think about you, launch a podcast or have interviews and do all of those things successfully. Right. I think it's just a case of taking them to their maximum potential. I think a lot of people, they have these interests, but they don't take them further. Whereas, I don't know, spending time with people who do pursue things and are confident in their passions. The only difference is that they are following through each of those individual passions. And I think that's so important.
For me, it's almost like a point of embarrassment if I'm doing something half-heartedly. I just don't want to do it at all. Do you feel like that, or?
Absolutely. And my first martial arts, I used to do Kung Fu Wing Chun before. My first, my instructor used to always say, Nina, you have to, like, the kettle has to boil. Like, make the kettle boil, you know?
I like that one.
Regardless of what you're doing. And
I like that one.
I don't know. It's interesting. I think like fighting, combat, martial arts, sports, it magnifies those things. Like, I think especially now that I'm kind of maybe refocusing a bit in terms of my non-jiu-jitsu professional life, I think everything's much more clearer in terms of what I'm doing, what I'm trying to achieve, strategies behind it. And I think I've learned all of those things through sports, through jiu-jitsu.
Right. See, that's an interesting point. Because, like I said, you're a black belt, all right? I just want to say that loud and proud, right? Because that's so impressive to me. It just sounds, I can't even get my head around that concept. And but with that, was that a pinnacle for you? Was that job done? Is that the kettle boiled at that point, or do you have to set new goals after that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If anything, I remember the day I got my belt, and I guess I kind of knew that it was happening. It felt like I didn't feel very excited or very proud on that particular day, strangely enough. It took a few months for it to kind of settle in. But I think, again, like martial arts or jiu-jitsu is a good metaphor for life because it didn't stop there. You're forever learning. Yeah. Forever. And I think in any industry, any profession, if you, I don't know, win a Brit Award or you get a promotion, immediately most people are thinking, well, what's next? Yeah. What's next? It's just personal development, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's why sports is such a good metaphor, very transferable to like other things. It's interesting. Alistair Campbell wrote a book called Winners. Okay. And it was like talking about basing the framework of sports, like taking individual sports people or coaches like Mayweather or Ferguson, and saying, you know, this is how you strategize and become successful, become so-called winners. Like, this is how you can apply it to a professional perspective or like non-sports. And I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah,
I'm almost selfishly getting life coaching right now because I'm asking you questions about myself and putting it in your head and saying, what's your answer for it? So you can give me my answers about myself. So basically, I remember when I was 28, and that was literally a part of my life when I was just like, shit, this is not what I expected. I was panicking, and I was like, okay, I need to just go crazy now. And within a 2 or 3 years, I got to where I wanted to be then. Yeah. And like you said, it was nothing. It was just, I'm not saying you're saying being black was nothing.
I understand what you're saying, yeah, I understand.
Right?
It felt like, oh, it was this.
But this worries me, because I'm almost thinking, will I ever be content?
No. I think that's just who you are, and I found that as well. So I used to, but again, I think you can learn to be appreciative, you can learn to be present. Sure. So I think I've had a lot of these character traits, which for me have been clear to me, have been magnified through my approach to competition and sports. So even, like, I used to maybe win a big championship or like medal at the World Championships or the Euros, or, you know, something that might be deemed quite significant. For me, it didn't at all. I wasn't able to see the positives or the good aspects. I was just like, well, but it took me this much time to win, or I won by an advantage, or I didn't submit everyone. There was always something to be critical of. I was never happy, never satisfied. Okay. Because I'm always thinking, well, how can I be better? How can I be better? I think life probably teaches you that you should just appreciate the things that you've done well. And I think we've probably all had those moments where we're like, wow, I'm here right now, but this isn't where I thought I would be, you know.
Yeah.
You know? I think when you're always thinking, oh, well, I need to do this now, that's you projecting into the future. You're not being present, right? There's always going to be challenges, I think. And you asked about Cambridge before. I think that was a very challenging period.
Yes.
And one I would not at the time describe as positive at all. But in retrospect, it was challenging, and I grew as a result of it. So
right.
I can describe it as positive now.
Do you mind me probing on why it was negative?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it. Obviously, we know that it's an environment of privilege. I think that was difficult to just suddenly be almost thrown into that environment and not have any skills in terms of how to navigate it.
Right.
Or cope. And I don't think the environment was very friendly.
Oh wow.
And from what I hear, it hasn't changed very much either. I think from somebody coming from a certain background, a working class background, or comprehensive educated, it's not the most.
Is it cold?
Yeah, that is inevitable. I think that's maybe just a cultural point. I think I would go further though. I think there was, elements of discrimination, I'd say. I think that
it's elitism.
It absolutely is, yeah, absolutely is. And I think you either adapt to it or you I guess find yourself a bit shut out, I guess. And
I haven't, I've gone to university, I haven't been Oxford, but just how I'd almost imagine that, I imagine someone from a certain background would either really buy into that and feel like I've elevated and I've left the, I'm out of there, I'm out of these guys, I'm with these guys now. So it might go down to a personality trait really, that whether or not you're going to buy into that or not.
Yeah, so I think at the time that's how I treated it. I felt like I could either buy into this, buy into their culture, their way of living, and then I felt like I would be a sellout and I wouldn't be true to my roots, and that wouldn't. Whereas I'm quite headstrong, so I did the exact, I think probably the opposite, which wasn't very productive. I'm saying, in retrospect, not a good productive use of time. Where I felt the opposite. Again, I was having this kind of like a fighting mentality. It was like an antithesis. I was like, no, this isn't. I need to fight against this. Everything was like a struggle. I was like, I have to struggle through. I have to work extra hard.
Right.
Whereas I don't think that's necessarily a healthy outlook, and I think you can do both. I think that's really important.
Right.
Like you can stay, and I think the generations today, I think especially when we're talking about discussions around BLM and everything, I think there's an understanding now that you can aspire to do better, be better, and in your career or whatever it might be, but you can also stay true to your roots or where you come from. It's possible to do both, but at the time it didn't feel like it was possible, like one or the other, and I definitely wasn't gonna just try and fit into an environment that I felt like wasn't very inclusive, I guess.
Did you have any like-minded people there around you, or then again, maybe that's, if you say no, then people are going to be like, oh my god, I was your best friend. And
no, literally. There was lots of lovely people on an individual level. And I think even now when we have discussions about, say, racism or privilege, we can acknowledge that a lot of people don't mean, they're not bad intentioned. So you can get along with people, but in terms of building kind of deep and meaningful relationships, I do have one friend from my time in Cambridge, which doesn't say a lot about
do you know what?
About my skills, my navigation and relationship building skills at the time. But again, she came from a similar background.
Right.
So we had a lot in common. In that sense.
Yeah.
It was just a bit. It was a bit like I remember when like amongst my kind of peer group, we'd be, say, like just hanging out in the common room or whatever it was, and they'd be playing some PlayStation, or the game where you like sing.
Sing stuff.
And they'd be like, oh Nina, there's a rap section. Nina, jump in. I'm like, why would I know how to rap? I mean, I wish I could, but it's like, come on Nina, that's you. Come on, I'm from London.
That made me feel sick.
Yeah, but it's interesting, like the attitude of the students. There was a lot of that happening.
Right.
But in a way, it wasn't spiteful.
Yes.
It was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, but whereas from the kind of staff level, when it came from there, it was
tough.
It wasn't good.
Mm.
It wasn't good. I remember my personal tutor.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to apply for a hardship grant, which I was perfectly entitled to do.
Right.
And I was eligible to do so.
Mm-hmm.
But my personal tutor wanted to have an interview with me in advance to just check. I don't know what he wanted to check, but I think it had to come from him, or he had to sign off on it, or something along those lines. And I remember he said, he was like, Nina, you do know this is our old boys' money. It shouldn't go to you. You don't deserve this.
Really?
Like and now I look back, I'm like, that was outrageous. But at the time, there was so much of that, and it was just was really upsetting. But it just didn't feel like there was anything.
That's not.
And that was my personal tutor.
Cheers.